You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt McGackie, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped an amazing episode with Tony and Zach of Almost Dead. There's this episode and over 440 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
What is up, good people? Welcome back to another episode of the show. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. I super appreciate you. I hope all is good wherever you are, and I hope you're taking care of each other out there. This week, I have my dude Scott Strange from Templo Audio Devices coming back. This dude is one of the most interesting people that I have ever talked to on the podcast. Yes, he makes pedals, and yes, we go over all the new cool stuff that he is coming up with. But the real reason, beyond the pedals being cool, of course they are, and I don't want to minimize that. But the real reason that I've had Scott on 3 times is because he's such an interesting dude. And if you don't know his story, go back and listen to the last couple episodes that he's been on, because you're going to want some context for this guy's life. He's an awesome guy. And the way he goes about his day-to-day is not exactly what you might call conventional. So go check those episodes out if you haven't already. But if you have, well, you're already familiar, so you're ready to get into why this guy is sitting outside of a house in Mexico having a conversation with me on this episode. And if you dig this chat and the other ones we've had, you are not going to want to miss the Patreon, because it is pretty psychedelic. Let's just leave it at that. It's pretty out there. We get pretty weird on this week's Patreon episode. And for just $5 a month, you can get access to all of those behind closed door Patreon episodes. And it helps out immensely if you can do that. You will also get access to the ad-free feed of this show, and it all helps out tremendously. So if you can do that and you want extra episodes, that is the place to go. Go to patreon.com/tonemob for all of that. And if you can't do that and you're not really that interested, I totally understand, but I would appreciate it if you would share this podcast with somebody you think might like it. I would really, really love it if you could do that. It could be this episode, it could be any other episode, any episode you thought was pretty wild, pretty cool. Please share that with somebody. I've seen a huge uptake in the downloads on the King Buzzo episode recently. It's an older episode. It's probably 2 or 3 years old at this point. I sat down with Buzz Osborne from the Melvins, and we had a great gear chat. And yeah, that one's blowing up right now. I don't know if there's a Melvins forum somewhere or something, but lots of people are downloading that episode kind of out of nowhere. So maybe that's a good one to share with people. Go check that out. And if you hadn't listened to that episode, it's pretty good. I recommend it. So go back in your podcast player and do that. And that's enough plugging. Let's get to this episode with Scott Strange. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today I have returning for a 3rd episode, Mr. Scott Strange from Templo. What's going on, man?
How you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. So we'll set the scene a little bit for everybody. You are currently in Mexico.
As you can tell, I'm in the jungle.
Obviously.
No, I'm down on the west coast of Mexico near Puerto Vallarta, in just a small town that I come to. Basically, people think I'm living the dream, but it's just Canadian rent is insane, and I'd rather have sunshine than none. So
okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, so I come down here and just try and balance out, because when I'm in Canada, I basically am just soldering or designing stuff from morning to night. So trying to find that balance, the life balance, and getting there.
I hear you. Yeah, well, for the people who haven't heard your story, we're not going to go over the same thing again.
Yeah,
so,
they can watch the old episodes.
Yeah, they need to go back to the old episodes. But I think it does bear repeating that you live a very interesting life, a lot different than most people. You spend a lot of time traveling, but not just traveling, literally just living on the road in different places. And I know you've kind of settled down back home a little bit more than you used to, but You still bounce around a lot more than most folks I know. So Mexico is this place in Mexico is somewhere you've been a lot. Is that right?
Yeah, I've come here a bit. I lived in other parts of Mexico, and I find like I'm trying to find that the balance between kind of living, I guess, like a regular life, but also some of the luxuries of what I'm used to in my country. So like, because if you go deep into Mexico, the
Mm-hmm.
cost of living is good and the quality of life is good. But, I'm also come from a place where I'm used to being able to maybe have pizza or sushi or something every once in a while. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to find that spot without being too in a touristy spot either, because then, that changes the whole dynamic. So I've lived in different places, kind of did a lot of hitchhiking through like the south of Mexico and then central. But this is just kind of an easy spot because there's a direct flight to Canada, and I travel with my dog, so
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the big factors. Temple, he's right down there, but he's been with me for 11, 12 years now by my side, and that's who
Wow.
the company's named after. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Templo is his Spanish name. His name's Temple, but
Okay.
so that's a factor. Like the bringing him, I try and do direct flights. So
Totally.
here and Cancun, but I used to live in Tulum for a while, and then it blew up, so I left there about 8 years ago. But yeah, I don't really have a real firm home base, so I'm kind of winging it, which makes it difficult to have like a company, right? Like
Sure.
they really want you to have an address and all that kind of fun stuff.
They really want you to pay taxes for some reason.
Yeah,
Like they're really into
yeah.
that. Yeah, they're big
Hmm.
fans of you doing that.
They get upset when you don't.
It's weird. I just like, come on, it's not your money. Leave me alone. Why you got to be in my business? So what is that like? I mean, obviously there's some logistical challenges with paperwork, but I imagine it's at least as hard, if not harder, like actually making stuff when you're bouncing around from place to place. How do you manage that?
So I've been really just winging it this whole time. Basically built a company on the basis of I just want this cool stuff to exist,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to figure it out. And when I first started the company, I literally was still kind of a living out of a backpack. I was on a plane, and a guy next to me is like, "Oh, what's that amp you got?" I was like, "Oh, I want to start a company," and he's like, "Let me help you kind of get started in business stuff." And from there, just kind of made it up as I went. Like I started calling companies, be like, "Hey, where do I get speakers? Where do I get knobs?" And
Mm-hmm.
just been doing that the whole time. So recently, so it just kind of evolved, and we talked about that on some of the other episodes. But in the last year or so, I'm trying to scale things and become like a stable company with regular supply, because I mean, a lot of people want some of the things I'm making, so I want to be able to have those available.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, I'm trying to get to that point of stability now. That's where I'm getting to. So what I did was this last summer, I had two of my friends come and stay with me for a month and um, just make a bunch of pedals and inventory. And meanwhile, I was designing stuff. So that gave me enough inventory to kind of come here and still be able to sell while I'm living here and designing and doing. So while I'm here, I'm mostly doing um, like I'm trying to create videos and content and demos, because that's the part that's really lacking when I'm designing. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing like the spinning plates thing, because I'm doing literally everything other than like my friends coming to help me was the first time anybody's really participated. Before that, I soldered every single joint on every single pedal that I've ever sold. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting to that point where I'm trying to bring in other people to make the operation able to grow, to have more um, like stock, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I'm looking at maybe going to stores or getting a fulfillment service so that I can have still that flexible lifestyle, um, but kind of like yeah, like I'm trying to figure out how to make this work for me and for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did right now is I actually have my family shipping stuff for me. So when you order something, I get the order, I'll create the shipping label, I'll send it to my family, and then every couple of days they'll just go to the post office and drop off stuff that I've already made. But in the future, I want to have a fulfillment service so that that's handled in a more efficient manner and all this stuff. So for now, there's like a day or two waiting in between. But luckily, everybody that buys my stuff has been super awesome, because I think they still get that I'm grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm just trying to figure all that out and just making it up, because my goal was never like, I was never like, oh, I'm a business major, let's find something that I can sell. It's more, I want this thing to exist. How do I go about doing that? So
There's
I'm coming from that angle.
there's not a lot of it sounds kind of funny to say, but there are not very many company owners in this industry that have MBAs. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some, and but honestly, I legitimately can't think of anybody that I know of any to at any level, from the smallest startup to the most seemingly successful companies in the industry, where the founder actually had an MBA. Yeah, so that's kind of weird. I don't know if that's super normal. And now on the flip side, I know a lot of like higher up like employees that do, which is kind of, I don't know what that means or if it means anything at all actually, but
Well, I think when it comes to, and I'm doing some of that too, is you find people who are specialized. So I'm a generalist, and I have the map, I have the vision of where I want things to go and to be, and then you find people who have specializations in those tools you need to accomplish that,
that makes
right?
sense.
Like, and that's kind of what a CEO does, or a president, or a business owner. I think is that you have the big picture, and then you find who's good at everything. So for example, like I have my friend Dave, and I haven't really shown him much, but he's basically the silent partner in this business, because he's been my friend for maybe 15 years. He is a genius. He has absolute passion for pedals and anything vintage, and he hand builds tube amps. He'll just go, like during COVID, he went on like a compressor bender and just built every studio compressor he could find, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's influenced basically my whole musical or music effects career, and he's still integral to everything I do. But he's not interested in business. He's not interested in mass producing anything, but he loves the challenge. So we talk on the phone every night, and I go, hey, I'm trying to solve this, and I've got this going, but I can't, there's just this one thing. And he'll be like, let me think about it. And then he'll text me, an hour later and go, check out this old schematic from this rare thing and just this little section. I go, boom, there's the solve. And that's what he's kind of been this whole time. So having him there, without him, I couldn't do this. But just having him, it wouldn't work either. So I bring the kind of the direction, the product idea, the user interface, all that kind of stuff. And then for those very specific, like he's got the mojo, I think, a lot of the time, because he's just loves it so much. And then I got lucky this past year. I have a friend I went to high school with who I haven't really kept in touch with much. We reconnected, and he's done amazingly well for himself in the online sales space, and he's got several businesses going on. He's part owner of some restaurants in my hometown. So we reconnected, and he goes, well, let me help you with, Shopify and your website and all this stuff. And him being able to be a specialist in those things has allowed me to focus more on what I'm good at. So yeah, I feel like having those people around you who have those specialized skill sets allows the whole thing to move forward together. And I think, yeah, maybe that's kind of what you were referring to with those people. Are you still there?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, I lost you for a second.
Did you? Yeah. Oh, it might do that once in a while. I can still hear you.
Oh, okay, great. I thought it was the Mexican Wi-Fi. So
Mexican Wi-Fi is better than some of the American Wi-Fi that I've dealt with in the past.
Yeah,
so you're doing
they've
good.
been coming up. Yeah, they've been coming up in the past few years. This town used to have maybe two or like every once in a while there'd just be no reception for 2 or 3 days, which is nice because it's kind of like a little hippie surfer town. So every once in a while, everybody would just not be able to use their phones, and you're kind of like, we're free.
It's like the before times. This is
Yeah.
so
nice. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that is true, and I think that's true with any business that grows past just a single person, right? You get to a point where you know, for a while you are the best person to do everything because it's small enough, and you know exactly what you're trying to execute. So you are the best person to do everything, but not for very long. Pretty soon, you have to get good at delegating or recognizing where your weaknesses are, where other people's strengths are, and getting them to help you execute on those parts. So I think you're right. The company founder, and maybe that's a true thing across a lot of different creative industries. I'm not sure, but maybe lots of company founders are more generalists. Maybe they have a specific vision, but like a general skill set, and then you got to kind of put all the ingredients together to make the soup.
Yeah, that's my conflict. I find, like, I realized early on that I was spinning plates, and in the most literal sense, if you're over here kind of spinning this plate of design, then the other plate of promotion is falling or whatever, and so you're trying to chase after every element. And so I realized, okay, my media is only 50% as good as it could be if I had somebody who was doing that full time, or and so I really realized that early on, and I'm in the process now of trying to, because the difficulty lies in finding somebody you trust that to convey your vision in whatever aspect you put them in. So if I find a social media person, I want to know that they're going to be responding to people the way I would want. And, because I tell everybody who messaged me on Instagram, I usually write them back pretty quickly if they have questions and all this stuff, because I care about the stuff, and I care about like people getting what works for them and all this stuff. So answering questions, make sure they understand. But finding somebody that I know would represent me well has been a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And even with my media. So like, let's say I go find somebody and I say, they're like, oh, I'm a social media person. I go, great, but what do you know about music gear? What do you know about what people really need this for, and where it would be useful to them, and how to communicate to them what its strengths and weaknesses are so they can properly choose if it's for them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
that's one thing I can say, like with some degree of confidence, is we've hired people from time to time to help out with the social media side at Stringjoy, and it never is the ultimate solution. I'm sure one day it will be somebody other than the 3 people at the company that kind of do it as part of their jobs. I'm sure at some point it will be someone's full-time thing.
Yeah.
But they have the knowledge of the product is absolutely essential. You can't really get, if you were selling, slippers or something, you could probably get a general quote unquote social media management company and they could handle it just fine. But in our industry, you've got to know what you're talking about because people have technical questions.
Yeah. And I think that's just the nature of how this works. Like, if you think of every company, and even the tropes in movies of like, the founder of a company, the original vision was this, and then as it becomes big and corporate and all those things, they kind of lose touch with what maybe made it great. And the same could be said about certain bands. If you're like, oh, I like their early stuff, and then as it evolves and as the thing gets bigger, it changes the nature of it. And I think that's inevitable. But I'm striving to kind of keep control of as much as I can and keep it small. Like, I'm not looking for infinite growth as with shareholders. I would like me and maybe 3 or 4 other people to help me manage the other stuff, and kind of just have a tightly, like a well-oiled machine that works and makes good stuff and sticks to what I'm trying to accomplish. Because otherwise I wouldn't want to do it. And that's why, even selling the company, selling the company isn't really appealing to me, because I think like I am the company, right? Like, my choices and what I care about make and inform the products I'm making. And so if I hand that off to somebody else, they would probably be like, I would be consulting all the time to make sure they're sticking within the vision, because or else it just falls apart and becomes something else.
Yep. Yeah, it's a weird thing. Trying to manage growth and trying to manage the business in a way that is in line with your original idea, while also knowing which parts you can relinquish. It's an ever evolving, growing process that I don't know if you ever truly fully take your hand off the wheel unless you do sell it. At least if you care about it still, and I guess I've seen examples where the owner didn't care about it anymore, and it was very, very obvious. Usually when, at least in this industry, when you go like, what is going on with that company? What is their deal? It's either the owner has too much on their plate personally, or they don't care anymore. If as soon as you start asking those questions, like, what's the deal with them? Usually it's like the owner's distracted by something. Usually.
Well, it's an interesting concept to remember that all companies are just made of people. You know what I mean? Like when you're watching a company as an entity and you think, oh, it's professional, and the customer service lines answer my questions in a way, and we have this expectation now, especially with Amazon and all these, because when I first started the company, I thought maybe I'll sound more professional if I use like the we, like we here at Templo Devices, and I quickly realized, first of all, that's not genuine, and it misleads people because then they start thinking there's a whole team, and if I'm upset, I'll be like, what's wrong with this company? I'm like, oh hi, I'm actually one guy living in a truck right now trying to get your orders out at the beginning. And so I think remembering and bringing it back to the human aspect, especially in this industry, because most of these companies are very small, grassroots, and like even ones you would think are like a corporate company, it's still just people who are passionate about pedals and making them. And it's very like we forget the human element, but like you were saying with what's going on with that company is like, well, stuff happens in people's lives, and let's say the owner of this company gets like a divorce or something, and that'll affect the whole thing, and you think, okay, well, these pedals will always be available, you can go into a store and get them, and that's not the case. Like everything's kind of mutable over time.
100%. Yeah, it is interesting. It's something that's worth reiterating, and it's been on my mind a bit lately. Just some chats that I've had with listeners. Actually, one person was talking about, oh, I really love what you guys are doing. Don't ever sell the company. And one person said, like, yeah, it'd be weird if you guys like went public. And it shows the distortion of what people, not everyone, but some people like think this industry is something that it's not. And I had to tell them, like, only 2 companies that I'm aware of in our industry have ever went public, and it was temporary. It didn't last very long, and it didn't go well. That was Guitar Center and Fender. And Fender is currently owned largely by a Hawaiian car dealership. So that is, yes. Servco is the name of the company. They are the largest Toyota dealer in Hawaii, and I think they have a dealership in Australia too.
Do they do a thing where you buy a car and you get a Strat?
I wish. That'd be sick, right? That'd be awesome. Roll around in a Tacoma with a brand new Jazzmaster. I could do that. That'd be cool. But they bought an interest in the company back in the day, like a fairly large stake, and then I don't remember how it all shook out in legal terms, but eventually they became the majority ownership. So like people don't realize that they think Fender is Fender, and like Fender is Servco Pacific.
Yeah, like you think of Fender as an institution, and there's got to be a building somewhere with some silver-haired old man and a boardroom full of guitar aficionados. And
I mean that might be true too, but yeah, it's I mean Gibson's owned by a private investment firm largely. I mean like there's not any, as far as I'm aware, publicly traded music instrument companies at all.
Maybe I can be the first. I'll start selling shares.
You're gonna IPO
Templo coin.
Templo coin. Now we're talking.
I think the pedals are the shares. You buy a pedal, and that's like they grow over time. It's an investment.
Some people certainly act like they have a say in your company when they buy your product. Let's just put it that way. They like to think they do anyway.
Well, it's funny because there's a lady that's got a falafel cart down here, and I buy her falafels all the time. But if she stops making them one day, it'll suck. But you'd be like, it's that's life. Like the same with my pedals. You buy the pedal because you like it, and it's kind of separate from me in a way. Like I buy her falafel, I eat it, I walk away. Don't eat my pedals. But
yeah, not a good idea. Not recommended.
But speaking of which, I actually maybe we can talk about some of the ones I have coming out.
Well, actually, that is a good segue because you mentioned your friend that was diving into compressors, and obviously you've got a compressor. But what else you got going on? Let's talk about some of that stuff.
Well, okay, so basically what happened, I made the amp, I made the splice pedal, and then the Real Deluxe came out. And that blew up, and everybody was like, holy crap, I think you're onto something. And then from that that was when I started to hit my stride, I think, design-wise, and find kind of my design language and some of the features that I wanted to have consistently. So I'm starting to do like a series where I'm doing these ones that are 125B, two large knobs, and then maybe some smaller controls, so like some switches or pots depending on the pedal. The lights in the same place, top mounted jacks, and then a DI out on everything. Because I've kind of already got that all figured out, I just throw it on basically everything so people have that functionality, which is nice. But so I'm kind of doing a series now. So I have the Model 33, which is my old vibrato that I put into the Real Deluxe with the Real Deal preamp. I'm doing that as a standalone now, but it's the Model 66 because I'm doing it stereo. And so it's a stereo vibrato with two DI outs. So that's kind of neat. Yeah, so it gives quite a bit of functionality. So I'm kind of also thinking, because people, ask me for certain stuff, and I can't really do custom anymore, maybe, but I'd rather kind of try and cover as many bases as I can with a more large scale produced item. So a lot of people who do home recording and studio stuff have been saying, like, if it had this, that would be handy. So I'm trying to do stuff that has more stereo functionality. So I'm doing actually another thing I'm doing is the Real Deal Studio. So it's a Real Deluxe, but it's two of them in one enclosure. So four jacks and two of them. There's no foot switches. So it's like on the desktop and you've got two Real Deluxes. I can actually grab some.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
I'll be right back. You can edit this out.
Or maybe I won't. We'll see.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Merit Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations and 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man? That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services. And it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby because, let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff. Maybe I will just leave it
just
in.
a video of me running away in slow motion.
Oh, you're so fast. You're so fast.
So this is the Model 33, and I've got the two DI out jacks.
Yeah.
And then there's a little knob for blending phase or just vibrato.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is kind of the format. So two knobs, lights in the middle, and then the top jacks is nice, I find, because then you can kind of make a very compact board. Oh, can you hear the?
Yeah, I'm like, what's going on? Somebody getting arrested?
No. There's they drive up and down with speakers in their car, and they're selling corn, or they're advertising the circus coming to town. It's lovely.
I kind of
If you
like
don't
that.
live here, it's fun. Except when you're standing on the road and they go right by you, and then the guy parks right there and goes on his phone, and it's just blasting you. And you're like, because they don't use great speakers. That's the one thing I've noticed down here. The musician talent level is amazing, but the tone and the quality of like speakers and like the keyboard tones they use and all that stuff is just like, for somebody who likes tone, I'm like, please.
You're killing
like,
me.
The tone is off. Well, that's the thing, is like their musicianship is amazing, right? The rhythm and a lot of the stuff, but sometimes the tone just kills me, because people do what they can, and if you have access to PA speakers and that's what you use or whatever. But yeah, so this is the format. So 2 knobs, 125B, DI out, top jacks, and then some small controls. So I'm doing several like this. This one here is a diode compressor.
Okay.
So this one is like an actual rack mount diode compressor that I've adapted to run off 9 volts. So it does have a charge pump in it. So this is it's very smooth. I really like this a lot. It's cool on bass. 1 second, I think Buddy's breaking something down the street. Okay, so what that guy does, so that guy drives around and gets scrap metal. So he's yelling, hey, bring out your scrap metal. So he's just slamming a fridge into the back of his pickup truck right now. You can probably hear that.
This is the wonders of podcasting. You never know what kind of environments people are going to be in. I'm glad you're telling me. I like the play-by-play. That's
the
nice.
Narrating. Yeah, well, you can. There's the roosters. There's all kinds of stuff. The dogs. And I just rented this place for a month, and then once you get in, you realize, that right next door they're building a concrete other building, and concrete. When they're working on that, they might as well be right next to you.
Sure.
So you quickly get used to the noise, but it's constant. So it's weird, because I went up. There's a mountain here. I drove up on my motorcycle to film some stuff, and when you get up there, you realize how quiet it is, because it's just here. It's constant noise. There's always roosters, dogs. But you do get used to it. But yeah, it's hard for recording, definitely, to do any kind of recording like that. And then everything's concrete. So indoors, like if you're playing an amp or something, everything's concrete. So it's really unforgiving sound-wise.
Just reverb everywhere and just
Yeah, or if your neighbor's blasting some country music or something, it might as well be in your house, because there's no sound absorption. It just dings off everything. So, you get used to it, but that's part of life. But yeah, I'll go back to just this guy. This one, really cool. So I was just to quickly explain, so I started designing and getting a design language. I ended up going back to Canada. I had some family stuff happen this year that was not so fun, so I had to go back and be with my mom. And so I'm like, okay, so I'm stuck in Canada for whatever number of months, and let's get some design work done. So I just kind of dug in and was just flying with the design work. So I came up, I think, with 7 or 8 new pedals this summer. Yeah. So I would find something. I'd quickly do a circuit board layout. I'd order a prototype. I'd try it out. And then with Dave, we kind of over the phone troubleshoot, or he comes over and he helps me kind of just polish some of those little bits. And, but this one's really cool. I like this one a lot. It's a diode compressor. I think this is probably the one I'm going to end up using the most. And it's just got these little 3-way switches to kind of dial in, instead of having, compressors have 5 knobs, whatever. And I thought, let's simplify it a bit. Just the important ones are knobs, because you don't want to be, when you're playing, I find the more stuff you have to change, the more it gets in the way of your creativity. If you have a huge board, it's like a whole other instrument. So I try and keep it simple, but still give the flexibility of this stuff. And you dial in and you go, okay, there's my sound I like.
Can you give me an overview of those toggles? What are they actually doing there?
There's an attack, a release, and a dynamic. So a ratio control.
Got it.
So yeah. And then the input. So one of them is kind of the sensitivity, but it's really on a compressor, depending on the design. Some of them you're changing the actual threshold, and some of them you're just changing kind of like an input gain. And if there's more input gain into a compressor, it'll squeeze more because it's hitting it harder. Right. So on this one, it's that. So there's an input gain and then an output volume. So it's just kind of, that doesn't change any of the dynamics, just how loud it comes out. But the other one does change the dynamics of the compressor bit. But this one's very, I wouldn't say clinical, but I feel like it's very smooth. Would be the thing, like less colorful, and just kind of like a very like a is a diode compressor, so they have their own flavor. And there's many compressors. So yeah, I was talking about my friend Dave, but he just started making like every compressor under the sun, the Neve, the SSL, and the cool thing was he's building them exactly, vintage correct. And
Right.
so he's telling me I get to go over to his house and try every kind there is and go, ooh, I like this one, I like that, and let's kind of design in that vein.
Right. Like, oh, well, I really like this one, but can we translate it to pedals, effectively, and yada, yada,
exactly.
yada.
That was a bit of a struggle, trying to get this one to work. And what I ended up doing was, instead of taking 9 volts, doubling it to 18 volts with a voltage doubler, and then I don't want to get too technical, but like making an artificial ground in the middle of there, I just used the regular 9 volts and then a chip to give me negative 9 volts. And so you have a swing of 18 volts from positive down to negative. And so it's just a different technique to do it, but that's how I ended up solving that. And that's kind of the fun, is like we just try this stuff and go, maybe this will work. And, some people have, like in a forum, have written, I tried this. And sometimes it's like written 7 years ago. You're like, maybe did that ever work? And then we try it, and there's like sometimes like trying to track down that information, and there's like this kind of it's almost like macheting through the jungle sometimes, of like uncharted territory, I guess. Trying to just come up with stuff, and then seeing what other people have done, and taking little bits and trying to make something unique, I guess.
Right.
And for me, that's the fun.
And that one's called the Outer Limit. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it does get pretty hard limiting at the most ratio.
For the audio only people. So yeah, it's called the Outer Limit. Cool.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right, because there's people just listening on their drive to work.
Yes.
And then this one is the Real Deal Studio. It looks pretty involved.
That looks so cool.
There's 2 Real Deluxes in one box. But I have this thing, and it's kind of gone back to the beginning of when I started doing this stuff. I would go over to Dave. So basically with Dave, I was traveling around, learning guitar, playing some stuff, and he taught me a lot. Like, he kind of, he was the genius. This was his thing since he was young, and I came into it later. And so he, early taught me to build pedals, and I would go over to his house and be like, how many more knobs can we add? How much more stuff can we put? Is there other parameters? Like, can I do a dry switch? Can I do? And he would, he'd be like, oh, like, because I'm like, what else can we do? And so I'm always trying to put as much functionality into stuff as possible, so that you have this large palette of things to draw from without making it too complicated to use. That's always kind of been my goal, is to shoot for that. How do I give you as much control as possible without it becoming overwhelming? And so with this one, I could just shove 2 Real Deluxes in a box and be like, call it a day. But I thought, let's do some weird stuff. So I put a bunch of switches here that connect the 2 vibratos together. So you can connect them together, and then you can have them at 2 different speeds, and it'll do like a galloping kind of thing. And then you can actually invert the phase of one. And so it's not actually, you won't get like a very accurate range of effects with that, but you could dial it in to get a few weird things by connecting them. And like, it just gives that extra, like almost like a circuit bent kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I threw some of that in there, and I'm always trying to make things as a dump truck. I'm always trying to make things as damn, the dump truck threw me off. Wait, can we cut this out? Do you edit these at all?
Sometimes. I might not edit that out. We'll see.
People just sit there waiting for me to continue. Like,
no, we're good.
Anyway, I'll just freeze. But yeah, like when I'm designing it, and with Dave too, we're always kind of keeping in mind, like, if I put in a feature, it kind of has to perform in the whole range. It can't be like, okay, half of it's good, and then when you get to here, it's like unusable. And I go, well, I can't really, if people are paying money for this, if you're making it for your friend, you'd be like, well,
sure.
But if if people are paying money for this, you want the whole thing to work properly. So most of the time, I'm shooting for everything works smoothly in the whole range. There's no kind of weirdness. But this one, I put in some switches where you do get some weirdness, and it's fun. Like, you get some unexpected stuff. So I'm excited for this one, the Real Deal Studio. And that's more for people, like in the studio, who So when I put this out, and it's really cool because the response to the Real Deal and Real Deluxe has been insane. Like I haven't not got a bad review, not even once. Um, where most people say this is my always on sound, or this is the sound I've been looking for and didn't know how to find until I saw this. And that's how I feel about it. Like I didn't invent it. I just found an old preamp, tried it, went, this is really cool. This is what I was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how do I put it in a format that's, has a great interface and is usable and maybe a few extra features, but the core sound of it is not mine. It's something that, was invented 60 years ago or something and just has this cool sound. So that's why like a lot of people want to use this on recordings and stuff like that. So that's why this in this form, just to make it easier. I could have said, hey, buy 2 real deluxes, but I thought I'd make a custom one.
So which unit, I feel like I heard you tell this story already, but which preamp is it based on? Which tape machine is this?
It's the Revox A77.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that one.
Well, so I wasn't either, and I was looking for something else, and it was in this page of like a random HTML website from 1998 or something, and this guy just had this posted the schematic and goes, "I really like this one better than the Neve," and I was like, "Okay, that says something. Let me just slap one together." And I actually prototyped it with SMD components, which is wild. Like they're like the size of a race, but that's all I had at the time, and I was just like, so the prototype was like this big, and like I was using a magnifying glass to make sure, and it worked first try, and I went, oh my god, and I started testing it, and then like a half an hour went by, and I went, oh wow, there's something to this. Like it's kind of got like a distortion that's a little kind of maybe raspy or but it has also, it feels like there's like a clean blend. So you have like the clear articulation of your clean and the distortion layered on top of it. I don't know, just the architecture of the preamp structure. And I mean, and if you're interested and you want to build your own pedals, you can go see that schematic and build it yourself. There's no mystery there. It's not like a secret recipe, but I changed a few things. I added some different input tone caps, some different bypass caps in the first stage to change kind of where the bass knee was. So full on, it's like really woofy, and then there's like a kind of a cutting through mids setting, and then a treble boost setting. So I just wanted to kind of give a range of features because it was originally designed for microphone.
Right.
Yeah, it's like microphone and a tape input or something like that, or yeah. So it wasn't really designed for guitar, but yeah, it sounds great, and it's such. I think why it's so popular is because it's so different than anything else that's out there, where people have maybe got fatigued from tube screamers or something, and then something else comes along and go, oh, this is in the same area but different.
There's all kinds of things like that, and sometimes they work well, and sometimes they don't. But like, I have an old like early 2000s, maybe late 90s Tascam Porta-Studio like 4-track tape recorder, and it secretly has an amazing like overdrive distortion on the input. Like it's not supposed to, but if you plug a guitar into it and then bypass it out and go out to a tube amp and crank it sounds so gnarly. It's so good.
Yeah. I think there's like a company doing that exact circuit. I can't remember. I just followed them on Instagram the other day. I sorry, dudes. I wish I could shout you out. But
was it Tark?
Yes.
I just met that guy. Why I was going to bring him up actually because I just met that guy at a shop in Portland, and I was like, oh, I think he might be basing it on like a little bit nicer Porta-Studio than the one I have. I can't remember the model number.
I think his is the big one.
Yeah, but it's based on that kind of idea. And as soon as he explained what it was, because he was poor guy, he got stuck in the shop with a bunch of pedal nerds. So, he was explaining it to one guy, and of course I'm like looking over his shoulder, like, "Oh, what are you talking about over there?" And I was like, "Sorry, I know you just explained this, but can you tell me what this is?" And then as soon as I got done, I was like, "Thanks, man. That looks really, really cool." Another guy was like, what is that you have there?" And it's got a VU meter in it. It just looks cool. So
the VU always, that's a tricky one to pull off manufacturing wise, but it's always like, that's what I did with the Pocket Studio Comp is I did my own LED VU. But I definitely looked at trying to get a real one in there. They're very bulky, and then sourcing good ones and all that stuff. But the VU is so fun. Like it's just such a nice visual representation.
It's so unnecessary, but so awesome.
Yeah.
I don't need it, but I do.
Yeah, paint some flames on the side, like make it go faster. But yeah, that's a nice feeling. But yeah, he's doing a cool one. And then there was another one. But yeah, like I think the thing with these with the preamps, because they're so different, but also like, oh yeah, this is what I was gonna say. Sorry, because you brought that up. When I started with the Real Deluxe, it reminded me of a Sony. I got the Sony reel to reel at Value Village once, like a thrift store, and it was funny because it was I think it was from Japan, because when I listened to the reel, it was the original ad for this reel to reel in Japanese.
Oh, cool!
That's it was like a jingle.
Yeah.
Solid state, too. And I was like, wow, that's sick. But when I plugged my guitar into it, it had this little white light bulb that would show the distortion, and that's why I put that in the Real Deluxe. There's a light, and in the Real deal that glows with the distortion, and that thing sounded amazing. And this reminds me of it very much, and gets that close to, like, you're not supposed to be using it that way, but it's very satisfying, the sound, and it's usable. It's very specific for certain uses, but
sure. I wonder if
just so satisfying.
I wonder if, like, going back to obviously we're not the first people to discover these types of uses in studio preamps and things like that.
Well, no, like the Beatles, right? Like, yeah, even back then.
The Beatles, I mean, it goes clear back to like some Nashville studio cats. That's how fuzz was invented, But it makes you wonder if when they did stumble upon it, if they're like, oh, am I breaking this really expensive piece of equipment by using it this way? Because, most of us guitarists don't understand how all this stuff works. But that would have been my gut feeling if I didn't know better. Like, oh, I think I'm ruining this, probably.
I feel like it's kind of like, even remember It Might Get Loud, the documentary, and
yeah.
And Jack White's whole ethos, and there's something to be said for, like, the limitations, and now we have so much available to us that we're almost inundated with options. But even so, back then it was like, well, this is what we have, let's make it work. And I feel like that spirit here in Mexico too, of like, whatever system they have, you make the best of it. You try and wrangle the best sounds you can out of what's available to you. And then, yeah, should they notice, that it's distorting, they go, oh, that's cool. But like, that's what they had available to them. Whereas now, like, we have all this stuff and we're almost spoiled with it. But like, so with that reel to reel, the Japanese one that I had, you just go, let's see if I can just, like, if I just had this to play a show with, that would color my whole output, my creative output. Right.
Yeah, we do.
That's what Jack White was saying.
We have so many options now, and Jack White was talking about that in when that come out, like 2007 or something like that. And he thought we had almost too many options now. I wonder what he thinks now, he had too many options then. I wonder what he thinks now, because it's insane what you can do just with your laptop. It's crazy.
I feel like he may have given up the battle. I feel like, because I think he's on social media now. I think, it's a hard fight, like even not having a cell phone or something nowadays, like, it's just inevitable. I feel like having these tools where they're like a double-edged sword. They give you something and they take something from you, having this access to all this stuff, but then, maybe it makes us more complacent creatively. And that's what I was saying with too many knobs. If you spend all this time trying to dial in your tone, it's like, when are you going to rock out? Sometimes you just got to go for it and feel it and make things easy to use. And that's why I'm trying to make stuff that's maybe a little lo-fi, maybe a little, simple. I'm doing all analog. I'm not doing, because, I could have learned some of the, what's it called? There's like the FV1 or whatever, some of the digital chips that you can put in analog pedals and all that stuff. But like, it's not that I couldn't go into that direction, as I don't want to, I think. And Dave, who's a huge inspiration taste-wise to me, he's very much like a old school kind of, not that he won't use a digital delay or something, but like, he loves the old stuff, and he's built that appreciation in me for that, the tube amps and all that stuff. And that's still going strong with a lot of people. I mean, tube amps are as popular as ever, but I think there's something to be said about that lo-fi flavor. And which brings me around actually to, I found this old circuit on some Facebook group where they post vintage electronics magazines from like the 40s. And I saw this schematic, and they used to draw them really cool, that like they'd actually draw all the parts, like the capacitors, and like, hand paint the whole thing. And I looked at this and went, oh, that's neat. And it's a compressor for a microphone, a simple, it's almost like a rudimentary diode compressor. And I went, there's something here. I built one. I go, oh, that's just, it's like throwing a blanket over your sound. So it wouldn't be usable for everything, but it was just so comfortable, like the sound. And I went, this is really neat. So I'm doing a pedal called 2-track, which is a stereo. So 2 of those in one 125B. And it's like a tape style compression. So it really sounds like going into a really crappy tape recorder. Like that really crappy. And I just love that. I just love that kind of, squishing everything down, making it not so sterile. And there's something really interesting to be found in there, I think.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Goodhertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're hearing it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblinssaudio.com. I think you're going to like what you find.
Bowie, Dylan, Marley. You've heard the names and maybe you've heard their songs, but what about the stories behind the records that made titans of music like these so universally loved and important? Join me, Josh Adam Myers, host of The 500, as each week I go through a different album from Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Albums list from 2012 with an incredible lineup of comedians, actors, and musicians, talking about how the music has impacted their lives. New episodes of The 500 come out every Wednesday. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
It's just so funny that we've come, there's something about us humans that we like things that sound a little bit wrong, or even look a little bit wrong. We seem to just like even the cheapest interface you can buy now, is super clean and sounds like pretty neutral, when you go to record. Even something you bought for $75 off of Craigslist or something is probably going to be pretty clean. And that was the design goal. They intended it to have a ton of headroom and to be as clean and flat as they possibly could at that price point. And here we are, we're like, yeah, we got to that's cool and all, but we need some mud and some dirt.
Like I remember there was a story I heard when I was, hoboing pretty hard, and my friends were laughing about this because you could go to Hot Topic and buy jeans. I never confirmed if this was true, but you could add on dirt stains and when you buy jeans that are kind of worn out and stuff like that.
Sure, but so they took it to another level, dirt
and
stains,
relicking jeans or whatever. But they do that with the guitars too. But I think there's something to be said for imperfection. I think that's where a lot of the flavor comes from, because if you went to heaven, you'd be bored in a week, kind of thing. We need drama, we need imperfections, we need that kind of stuff, I think, for it to remain interesting.
It does seem that way, and then even, it translates over into video where, you can get VHS packs from different video editing companies, so you can overlay it on your super clean digital camera footage and make it look like it's from 1993.
Well, I've been getting into photography a bit, and I've been using Fujifilm systems, and they do film emulations, and a lot of it is the little mistakes or imperfections of the color grading or the grain or whatever. They're adding that back in, and the picture has this life and this depth to it that, if you get a really good crisp lens, it's almost too crisp. You want it to be an interpretation of life, not necessarily a photocopy, right? And I think, and that's why people like tubes, is literally the way that it alters and distorts the sound and compresses it in an asymmetrical fashion, and that's pleasant to us, because just exactly copying the sound would be very unpleasant, I think. And that's kind of what happens with digital. But I feel like that's the influence of like, because I'm feeling that now of like, if I'm designing something and I want it to be sellable, if I want it to be mass produced, you want it to be as variable as possible. So like you were saying with a home interface, if you made a very colored interface, it would only serve a small portion of the people. And let's say somebody was making a completely different style of music. They were doing like Bollywood soundtracks. They would go, oh, well, that doesn't work for me. But with clean, you can have it appeal to the most amount of people. That's kind of like when people paint their houses beige, right? If you try to, if you try to appeal to this huge amount of people, you lose a certain amount of the uniqueness and the depth, I find. But that's the trade-off. So I'm going the other way. I'm going as weird and specific as possible. It seems to be working.
Hey, that's the important part. It seems to be working, right? So what do you think, like what are you envisioning when, say you go back home to Mexico and you're talking about having this stuff be available, pretty much at all times is the vibe I'm getting is at least that's the goal. How long or how far away from that goal do you think that you are?
Well, this year there's a large scaling that happened. Like my production went up, and so I'm seeing it's working. I'm finding a system and figuring it out. I mean, and so this summer, what I'm going to do is I'm flying back to Canada, and I'm going to rent a house just kind of a little bit outside of the city near my family, and then I'm going to bring more friends in and spend a month or two just making as many pedals as we can. And I've also got a factory doing some of the other stuff. So Splice, and then I'm moving the Real Deluxe to a factory because I just can't like keep up with the production of those. And the Nomads. So do some stuff factory, some stuff in-house, and just I'm trying to just scale my inventory, and everything I make, I'm just pretty much pouring back into more inventory. So I just had 1,000 Pocket Studio comps made. So if anybody wants a Pocket Studio comp, I have a storage space full of them. But so this I'm getting on making content and all that stuff to really show how versatile they are. But I'm just trying to build inventory and keep that going. And so I think over the next year that's the plan. Is I'm just trying to scale and get to a stable place of kind of always having available, and then some maybe smaller run hand built rarer stuff. Like I'm doing so in Mexico, I was like, okay, I'm done designing. I'm going to spend a few months, working on the website, making demo videos, doing all that stuff. And then I saw a reel by Ella Ray Feingold. I don't know if you saw that reel. I posted it, but it's she was playing the Maestro Rhythm and Sound.
Okay.
And the Maestro G2, and it's like a tabletop unit, and it just sounds like the soundtrack from Shaft. Like it's amazing. It's like an Ottawa fuzz with some other weird stuff in it. There's percussive, so you can put like clave or bongo on your pick attack. And it just sounded, and I was like, that's right in my wheelhouse. Like that's exactly the sounds I like kind of lo-fi, but it's still clean enough that it's very usable, very musical. And she was asking for she's like, anybody want to build a pedal version of this? Because I need one. I was like, all right.
Which one's this? Is that another dump truck?
Yeah, it's full of dirt. They're doing some construction right here, but always. But so I immediately went and looked at the circuit and went, oh, these are fairly common parts other than maybe some inductors and the light bulb for the auto wall. But it shouldn't be too hard to make this in large amounts. And that's what I have to factor in. Like if it gets into weird parts or they're hard to source, then I can't keep making them. Right. And so there's a lot of energy that goes into the design, like not only the circuit board, but the enclosure. Like that takes me, it's like a couple months process back and forth to get that all dialed in. So if I make these and there's only, 100 inductors or something available for them, it's, I could do a small run, but then, I want them to be available to people. Right? Like I don't like turning people down is the thing. I don't like people going like, oh, I need this. And it always makes me happy when somebody's like, oh, I want that. And I'm like, I can give it to you. So it's nice to be able to have. And so I looked at it. It seemed fairly straightforward in terms of parts. Like there's nothing too crazy or obsolete chips going on. So I was like, great. And then I just sat down and busted out a circuit board for it in maybe 2 days or something. And so that's arriving this week to Dave in Canada. And I ordered him all the parts. He's going to throw it together and give it a test. And I'm going to open up a pre-sale for that this summer. But that actually, I had a huge response to this thing because I didn't know how many people really love this thing. And I guess it's become really inaccessible. It's something like $3,000 or something if you want.
Yeah, they're super expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a shame. Like, and Dave does that too, where he'll build reproductions of stuff that's harder to get, and I think that's really neat to make. You know, you don't you own the big thing, and sometimes they're kind of clunky, and they have the quirks of being vintage. They'll have like the two-prong cord, or they'll be huge. And just like with the real deal, instead of bringing a tape machine to your gig, I'd like to be able to get that same sound, but in a modern format that's a pedal size. So I'm actually doing the like this size of pedal for it, and it's gonna have 3-foot switches. So there'll be a bypass. You can turn the fuzz on and off, and then you can bypass the wah wah or the echo repeat, it's called, which is like a percussive trem. But other than that, it's an identical, almost identical for legal reasons, circuit. Uh, You'll get you the same sound. So I'm getting the nice wah inductors and all that stuff to basically give you that exact unit, but in a format that runs off 18-volt regular power supply, true bypass, maybe some Gorva foot switches, and just have it be a nice clean form factor and still get that really cool old sound without spending a whole bunch of money and without it being like a big clunky thing to lug around. Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll be more reliable, and all that stuff too. That's a big thing with some of this vintage stuff. I love it, and I've got some vintage tape machines and reverb units and things like that around here. But I would never take it on a gig. Like it. I don't trust it. It could go.
Yeah.
Anything could go wrong with it. So yeah, keep those in the studio. So it's nice when you can take that same sound with you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of part of what I'm doing. So I kind of, I guess, have like slowly evolved some design rules and goals over time, just organically, of like, because everything I'm doing is not, again, like, I don't really think from a business perspective. I think from a what do I want, and how do I share it, and how do I make it practical to make and practical to use. And so that's where I start from, and so that's where that informs a lot of my decisions in terms of this stuff. So like, for example, like making this form factor, it serves me as a manufacturer because I already know my layout, so I can maybe save some time designing a circuit board or an enclosure drill pattern, because now I'm kind of doing the same thing. But also, as a user of these things, they go like this. They're very modular. They're kind of easy to read from a distance, that that there's the two main controls are there. You got a little stuff that you won't be touching as often. Like, all of those things are things that I think of, and those are just kind of rules that I didn't really think too hard about. It just kind of was like, oh well, this is what I need, or like what makes sense.
Oh, we froze. Oh, you're back. We froze there for a second, folks. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Well, I did hear all that. But I'm just looking at the time here. We're getting close to the end of the episode, and yeah, I've already asked you the classic questions. And you've talked about a lot of your products and that on this episode. Is there anything else you want to plug, or anybody you want to shout out, or anything you want to say to people before we wrap this thing up?
That's a good question. Keep your eyes peeled in the spring, maybe like June. I'm going to be doing all these kind of new things. I'm going to be doing small runs of those. I have the new Splice version 2 coming out with way more improvements. I'm really excited about that, probably end of summer. And right now, I have the amps and the Pocket Studio comps in stock. And so I'm going to be pushing those a lot, because I have those. And the more of those I sell, the more I can invest in these new things and just keep that rolling. So Pocket Studio comps are really awesome. I didn't really cover a lot of them, but they came in and they really exceeded my expectations. This was like a long process, maybe 3 years, to just kind of get all these awesome features into this thing. And I love it. Like, it was so much work, but I managed to shove everything I wanted to do with this thing in here. And
Nice.
The factory did an amazing job with the packaging, and they're really fun. And so, yeah, the Pocket Studio Comp is the one that is like kind of my exciting one for the moment. That's in stock, and definitely worth it if you want some you can use on your pedal board and at home recording, and it kind of does great for both of those. I actually put up a video of my friend. We went up to this mountain over here, and I just ran Aston condenser straight into this, used the fan and power from the Pocket Studio Comp, and then went out to a Zoom, and I was listening back, and it sounded like it sounded amazing. I couldn't believe, because I hadn't really tested it in that kind of environment and circumstance. And I was like, holy crap. Like it is really way better than I could have hoped, because it came out really cool. And I'm definitely excited about it. And I'm going to give you a little secret, because I did not put this in the manual, and I don't think I really published it anywhere.
Okay.
But last minute, when here's the tea, if you will, only on this podcast, the Tone Mob. When I had it made last minute to the factory, I did a last little revision. I said, "Oh, just throw this in there," and they're like, "You sure?" And I said, "Yeah, just change this one thing." And if you open the battery hatch, inside there's one little dip switch, and it says dirt next to it, and that adds in the feedback loop of the compressor a stack of diodes that kind of gives like a sort of tapey crunch, and you can get some really interesting saturated gainy kind of stuff, because when you put the ratio up on this thing, the higher the ratio, the more gain there is in general, but also the harder it squishes. And so if you go up higher gain and put those clipping on, like you get some really crazy saturated sustaining. I was almost getting maybe some like Big Muff kind of area,
nice.
A little bit, because it's like there's clipping diodes in the feedback path, and so I just threw that in as a neat little bonus if you want to get some color on this thing. So that's a little secret that
world exclusives.
Tone Mob.
Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on, and it's cool to see how your operation has grown, and the stuff you've learned and implemented is just getting more and more interesting over time. So thanks for coming on and sharing all that. I think it's really cool.
Thanks for having me. I'm just making it up as I go, but I'm trying my best.
I like it a lot. So instead of the classic question, since you've answered that, we're going to go with something a little more specific to your situation. So you're in Mexico. You already talked about the falafel lady, but like, what about, what is your go-to food? Obviously there's lots of Mexican food there, but I imagine there's other stuff too. What's your go-to place other than the falafel, since you already talked about it?
Okay. So in this town, I love Mexican food, chilaquiles and mole. It's really good. Depends where you are, which is really interesting that there's regional specialties. I'm a big fan of that. And when I'm in Yucatan, I have cochinita pibil, which is like the slow cooked pork with the orange. And but here in this town, there's a restaurant called Limbo, which my friend Carlos is the chef and owner of. It's a small restaurant, but he's doing very interesting experimental fermented stuff, traditional Mexican spices and things, like all kinds of interesting stuff. But I've been basically eating there every night because everything he makes is awesome. Like he does scallop ceviche, he does dry aged mahi on like a fennel kimchi. But he's doing, it's very hearty, it's very delicious. So I've been going to see. The place called Limbo, San Francisco. If ever you're in this part of the world near Vallarta, but I've been eating there pretty much every night because he does some amazing stuff and he really cares about the food.
I love that. Well, that is a perfect way to end this episode, I think. So shout out Carlos.
Now everybody's hungry.
Yeah, I love it.
Time to go.
All right. Well, let's see what kind of shenanigans we can get into on Patreon. I've got some. I got some other questions for you that we'll get weird with it. We'll get real weird over there.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mean OnlyFans? Yeah. We're going to OnlyFans after this.
Absolutely. Of course. That's what. Yeah. Not Patreon.
It's those kind of questions.
It's those kind of feet questions. All right, everybody. For Scott, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. All right, folks, there's another one. And let me remind you, the Patreon episode for this one is really, really trippy. We go into lots of different, areas of exploration. Let's put it that way. And you can get that for just $5 a month, as well as access to the ad-free feed. So just go to patreon.com/tonemob and you can help keep this show going and get access to all of that good stuff. Additionally, I am finally, after years of threatening to do so, putting a lot more effort into YouTube. So I'm not only publishing the video versions of the podcast over there, I'm also putting in a lot of effort into additional videos as well. I have one coming up about how to get free gear. What? Free gear? Yeah, sort of, kind of. I think you're going to like it. I think it'll be really insightful for a lot of people. Some of it'll be a no-duh for those in the industry, but I get enough questions about this kind of thing that I think it will be worth talking about. So please head over there, hit that like, comment, subscribe button, all that good stuff over on YouTube. I'm actually really genuinely trying to do that in earnest this year, and I would really appreciate any help I could get over there. So thank you all so much. I'll talk to you on the internet very soon. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
Hey, this is Steve Choi, host of the Musicians Guild podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media podcast network. Within the 4 walls of the Musicians Guild, we'll be discussing the habits, idiosyncrasies, experiences, and general psychology of my friends and peers, all involved with music in various capacities. Listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hello, Tom May here, host of Future Friday. I've spent the last 15 years on the road with my band, The Menzingers, where I've met all kinds of wild and fascinating people. So I started a podcast. On Future Friday, I talk to fellow musicians about the moments that made them, their passions outside of music, and the curiosities that tie us all together. I've also talked to the likes of UFO researchers, magicians, soldiers, and documentary filmmakers, and I'm constantly searching for folks that can shape and change our view of the world. You can check out Future Friday wherever you like.